Hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again, and today is a sequel to yesterday's video. We are talking about DC Rebirth, and it's kind of a teaser but also kind of an event video. Today, to give you an indication of what I've been up to for the last, well, forever, I'm going to talk through the Year of the Villain event, which is one event amongst many in the DC Rebirth continuity. It's really complicated, it's almost overwhelming. And whilst reading it as part of my idea of doing an overarching map for the whole of DC Rebirth, I find myself actually mapping out the individual event. And so, with a little bit of polish on the top and the bottom, I've decided, you know what? I'll just share it with you as an idea and an indication of what kind of direction the future map is going to look like. So, without any further ado, what is the Year of the Villain event? The Year of the Villain event is a really major, really key event in the DC Rebirth continuity. But that said, it's kind of one amongst a long daisy chain of events. So it's quite difficult to say with any degree of certainty exactly when you should start reading it and when you should finish reading it. The event requires a lot of background reading. How far back you want to go from this event really depends on your appetite and how much of a perfectionist or type P reader, for example, that you are. I try my best to be a type J reader, in other words, a very relaxed kind of reader when it comes to continuity and as little and obsessive as I possibly can be in this regard. So, with that in mind, what I would say, a chain of events that I would recommend you read as background reading. At the top are the oldest events, and as you go down this list that you can see on screen, we get to the newer events. Now, I've marked in here the ones that are optional. So I would say if you're really pretty obsessive, and I would recommend not being obsessive, start with Final Crisis. After Final Crisis, you then have Batman RIP and Batman The Return. Now, obviously, those are optional. That's how they're marked on here. But as well as that, those are all before the new 52. So we're talking about stuff prior to 2011, prior to any of the major reading maps that I've done. If you're reading Final Crisis, Batman RIP, and Batman The Return, you then should really read Snyder's Batman in New 52. And yes, this is all very Batman focused, but that is the nature of the Dark Knights. So if you're a type P kind of reader, you'd need to read all that. That is a fairly substantial amount of reading. Now, that is quite a lot. But if you're a bit more relaxed, if you're trying to be a bit more like me and trying to be a type J type reader, then what I would say is that the stuff you need to read before reading the Year of the Villain event is all within DC Rebirth. You basically need to read the Dark Knights Metal event. That then spins out into a short 7-issue maxi series called Batman Who Laughs. I'd recommend reading that. I'd recommend reading it anyway because it's excellent. You also need to read the early issues of Batman and Superman. And the reason for that is both Batman Superman and Batman Who Laughs will lead into an arc we're going to call The Infected, and more on that by the end of the video. So, where were we? For essential reads, you need to read Dark Knight's Metal. There's a couple of short spin offs from that. You then need to read No Justice, which is a mini series that bridges the two eras of the Justice League in this particular rebirth time span. And then after No Justice, you then need to read Scott Snyder's Justice League. So that starts in 2018. Issue 1 is straight after the 4-issue No Justice miniseries and is 24 issues long. That's what you need to read in terms of getting up to this point. And that's what I would recommend. So hopefully this is quite clear, the bits that are optional and the bits that are essential. Like I say, this is just a little teaser video. This is just a guide trying to indicate to you how my rebirth planning is going. So I'm not going to talk about Dark Knight's Metal and Batman Who Laughs and that sort of stuff yet. When the eventual full rebirth reading map and reading order drops, this will all be there. But right now, I'm just dropping this one map for this one event, just to give you a bit of an indication if, like me, you're reading this and picking it up as you go along. As for this list, there's no harm in reading other stuff or stuff that's earlier than this, but that's entirely up to you. A reader has to draw their own personal line somewhere between being a type P and a type J, and this is where I've drawn my personal line. Onto the event itself. Now, it's branded in 10 distinct waves of very specific branding. So I'll show these here. There's Prelude to Year of the Villain. There's The Offer. There's Dark Gifts. There's Evil Unleashed. There's Doom Rising. There's Year of the Villain. So these are branded as Year of the Villain issues. There's Hostile Takeover. There's only 3 issues branded Hostile Takeover, so a lot of people don't realize this was actually a very short phase of the Year of the Villain comics. There's then a part called Infected, which are 4 individual one-shots as well as 7 tie-ins. And then there's a miniseries called Hell Arisen, which is a 4-issue miniseries called Year of the Villain Hell Arisen. There's also 1 issue branded Aftermath, Year of the Villain Aftermath, which again, most reading guides online seem to neglect. So if you add up that entire list, all the issues, all the one-shots, and there are some, then what you actually have is 139 issues in total for this event. Whoa, it's a lot. That said, I've done the reading for you, and in a moment, what I'm going to show you is the reading kind of map or infographic that I put together for this, and it will tell you exactly what the essential issues are, what the token issues are, and what the optional issues are. And it'll hopefully be a bit of relief that most of the issues are optional or related. The central or essential issues are very, very clear. And then there's quite a few token issues or token arcs, which are the usual suspects, people like Harley Quinn and things like that. So hopefully that sets the scene. In a second, I'm going to edit the video and jump cut to the actual map itself, at which point I'll talk you through it. I would say grab a coffee, grab a seat. Is going to be a little bit overwhelming when you see the map for the first time, but bear with me, we'll talk it through together. All right, are we back? Hopefully we're back. Hopefully this is working, and hopefully you're not too shocked. This is the map. It looks busy. I know it looks busy. When this is finally done, this will be available on my website. But right now, I'm still polishing it, still messing around with it, so it's not available on my website like many of my other maps are. What I will say is that this contains every single issue we just talked about, all 139 of them, and I've tried to like arrange it with a little bit of branding, so you can see Year of the Villain, Hostile Takeover, all that sort of stuff. Um, I know it looks like a lot, and maybe this isn't how it's going to end up when I finally do release the Rebirth reading video. However, for now, why not talk about it? So, I'm going to start off at the top. I'm going to work my way down, but as you can see, it's the usual kind of color branding that I use for most of my videos. So green are the essential issues, yellow are all the related or optional, and then on the right here, you can see red for the completely token and not really relevant issues. That then takes us down to after the branded phases, at which point we get into some slightly weird trailing off bits here I'll talk about, and then the end of the Hell Arisen arc as well. Finally, just to say, I've put like little logos for every single family or branding or team or something here at the top to perhaps help slightly with navigation. I don't know if it does, so any feedback will be welcome. I am conscious it's busy, but ideally, when the Rebirth map is released, there will be a written guide available for people as well. But for now, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what I've been up to. So, no further ado, let's zoom in right into the heart of it. So, what we have here is Year of the Villain, where it starts. This is the Year of the Villain Prelude, Justice League issue 25. That leads straight into Year of the Villain issue 1. It's a one shot and it contains 3 short stories. As I recall, the second one is about Leviathan, which is teased here on the cover, which I don't really know much about because Superman is the one part of the Rebirth universe I have yet to read, as I should have mentioned in yesterday's video. After the Year of the Villain one shot, we then have Justice League issue 26, we can see here. This has no branding at all. It doesn't mention anything about Year of the Villain, which is just weird and stupid, but that's the nature of it. After that, we then start getting into the essential issues, the offer phase, and so on. Now, I know it sounds weird, but I'm just going to pause here for a second, and I'm just going to zoom out and we're just going to have a quick look at some of the others because I think that's actually the most sensible way to do this. So let's pause on Justice League, which is, by the way, the core and central continuity for the whole of Year of the Villain, and let's look at some of the others. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can, but at the same time, I'm aware anyone who's stumbled across my channel on the internet is clearly somebody who is into the details. So let's have a look and see what we can see. Oh, this is not a locked set of images, unfortunately, so I can accidentally drag and mess this up. So I'm hoping I don't do that. So let's start way on the left. We've got Harley Quinn with this issue right here. Harley Quinn, issue 63. This is the offer, branded with the offer. Then you go down to Dark Gifts, issue 64. We have Evil Unleashed, issue 65. Dark Rising, issue 66. Then the Year of the Villain issue 67. The Year of the Villain issues are often in number, so they're actually part of the sequence, but they will just have a much larger Year of the Villain branding there. Harley Quinn does not have a Hostile Takeover spin-off, as we can see here. This bit is empty. What it does have, however, is this weird one-shot all the way down here, which is called Harley Quinn Villain of the Year. This issue can literally go anywhere. As with most Harley Quinn stuff, this is just kind of weird meta lamp shading Deadpool-like goofiness. So feel free to read this wherever. But all of Harley's stuff is generally pretty unimpressive. It's all unrelated token stuff. Obviously, I'm slightly biased against Harley Quinn. I don't like it. But what I will say is, if you do like Harley Quinn, you'll like this as much as anything else. All right, I'm just going to zoom out a bit now. Now, I'm not going to go into this level of detail with every single part of the map. And the reason for that is that it'll be exhaustive and overwhelming, especially for this video. When I actually do the map video for the series, I will go into it in way more detail. But for now, let's just have a quick look at this in a very cursory kind of top level sort of way. So we have Harley Quinn on the left. The next one is actually Batman and the Outsiders. Now, issue 3 is the first one we can see here, and it's called The Offer, but it's actually part 3 of a arc called Lesser Gods. Here we are, Batman and the Outsiders. So to understand this, you really need to be reading the Lesser Gods arc. The next issue after this in Dark Gifts continues to be Lesser Gods, so is Evil Unleashed and Doom Rising, all the way down. So all these really are pretty unrelated to the Year of the Villain. And then you get this special here, Raj Al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul and the Outsiders, which again is unrelated. And that's it. That's the end of the Batman and the Outsiders issues with the branding. I wouldn't recommend reading them, or I wouldn't recommend especially tracking them down for this, rather. Next up, we have Justice League Odyssey. Again, you'll notice the red line. Again, straight up, it's got the offer, it's got Dark Gifts, it's got Evil Unleashed, it's got Doom Rising, and then it's got a Year of the Villain special starring Darkseid, and it has nothing to do with any Year of the Villain stuff. The Year of the Villain special issue here, which is issue 15, does end with an in-series cliffhanger, but that just continues as to part of the actual normal series. Let's go back up, and here we have Batman with Bane on the cover. Now, this is Batman issue 75. This has a minor epilogue, which relates to Year of the Villain, the making of the offer, but it's so unrelated to Year of the Villain that it doesn't even have the branding on the cover, as we can see here. So that just gives you an idea of how unrelated it is. None of the other Batman issues in this Tom King run have any other Year of the Villain stuff. This one here, issue 81, has a random final scene that alludes to what's going on in the Year of the Villain, but again, it's not a branded cover. And there are no other issues as part of this Batman Tom King run that have anything to do with Year of the Villain. I know a lot of online reading guys talk about it and say that, oh yeah, this is Year of the Villain reading. It's not. These are people who don't know what they're talking about. So that then takes us to, as I just zoom out, that then takes us into kind of more related or optional reading, so the yellow arcs. But what I want to do is just pan on over here to one particular issue that I think is worth just highlighting because it's essentially just not related whatsoever. He says, trying to find it. It's the Superman issue for Superman 13, which is here. Here we are. Superman 13. Do you know what? I should probably give this a border. How do I do that? Oh, I can't remember. Right, I'm going to give this a border saying it's red because this is essentially an unrelated issue to Year of the Villain as far as I'm aware. It's House of L, which is an ongoing arc, part 7, and it does end with Lex making Lois Lane an offer. That's the whole premise of this offer part of the event. However, no subsequent issues reference it. It's not made clear what it is. It's not made clear what's going on, and frankly, I couldn't see any way it was tied in. No subsequent issues have any branding either. So, frankly, from my point of view, I was like, well, I don't really see why this is a thing. So I'm just going to scroll up, and where was Superman? It was here somewhere. Ah, there it is. Um, so yeah, that Superman issue I'm going to box off and put into a red outline. Okay, how would I do that? There's got to be some way I would do that, and I can't remember how. All right, ladies, gentlemen, and others, I'm going to do that later when I'm not recording this. So let's pan out again. And again, I'm conscious how busy this is. But what I will say is that we're then looking at subsequent things to Batman, and these are all related or optional arcs. Should we start off with Action Comics? Let's do that. So for Action Comics, what we have is obviously the offer there, and you can see this on the right here. Then we have issue 1014 or 1014, which is Dark Gifts. This actually ends with the arrival of Naomi from Wonder Comics, which I didn't really fully understand because I haven't read Wonder Comics yet. We then have the Evil Unleashed one. We then have Doom Rising, and it then goes into Year of the Villain Luthor, which is actually the start of an arc called Metropolis Doom Part 1. What I would recommend is after reading this, after reading issue 1017, actually reading issues 1018, 19, 20, and 21 as well, because that finishes out the full 5-issue arc of Metropolis Doom. This final arc is all about the Legion teaming up with Leviathan, and by this point, Leviathan's identity is revealed, and Superman is also made quite a revelation about his identity. I don't really know where any of this fits in terms of the Justice, Doom, War, Hell, Arisen timeline. But just to make you aware, that's what's happening with Action Comics. It's not related. It is related, but it's not essential. It is optional, and there you have it. Let's move on. We've got Aquaman. Aquaman, again, these are all pretty straightforward, so I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can. We have issue 50, which is the offer here. That then takes us down. So that's actually a story arc called Amnesty, and it's Amnesty Part 1. We then have Amnesty Part 2. Amnesty Part 3 is Evil Unleashed. Amnesty Part 4 is Doom Rising. And the Year of the Villain is called Black Mantas. Now, that does need resolution because it ends on a cliffhanger. So the next issue that you should read if you read that is actually Aquaman issue 55. It's like I say, it's related. It's got one consistent thing about the gift that Lex Luthor has given Black Manta, but you do need to read Aquaman issue 55 to make sense of it. I've also stuck here Aquaman Annual 2, which is branded as Doom Rising, but despite the branding and when it was released, this is definitively set after the Amnesty arc as a whole. Therefore, it's set after issue 55 of Aquaman, and to be honest, it's utterly unrelated. It has nothing to do with Year of the Villain. All right, let's go back up, and we are now on Batgirl. So looking at Batgirl here, what we have is the offer. This is Oracle Rising Part 1. This then takes us down to Oracle Rising Part 2, which is Dark Gifts. Issue 39 is Oracle Rising Part 3. It's Evil Unleashed, and it also references the events of Batgirl and Birds of Prey Full Circle, which is a trade paperback in that particular series. It also references some events from Batman Superman, specifically the Batman Who Laughs arc and what that character does to Jim Gordon. So there's a bit here that you need to be aware of some slightly wider context. We then get into Doom Rising, which is Batgirl issue 40. The Year of the Villain issue is Oracle Rising Part 5, and that's Year of the Villain Oracle. And that has a cliffhanger ending, so you do need to read the final issue, which is Batgirl 42. It's unbranded, but that is the Oracle Rising Part 6 or part finale. Let's go back up, and here on the side we are looking at Catwoman. So in terms of Catwoman, again, of course, as you'll notice, still optional. This is an era written by Joelle Jones. I've actually read all the Catwoman and Batman, Batwoman sort of stuff. So yeah, we've got Joelle Jones here. It's the offer. It ends with the offer, and then it says to be continued in 2 months. Now, the reason for that is this weird thing. The reason I say this is written by Joelle Jones is because the next issue, which you can see here, which is Catwoman issue 14, branded Dark Gifts, that's written not by Joelle Jones. It's written by Ram V. It has got Year of the Villain branding, but it is entirely unrelated to anything happening in Year of the Villain or anything happening in the Joelle Jones series. In fact, this issue here, Dark Gifts, and the one below it here, as you can see, Catwoman in the Spotlight, which is Even Unleashed, those are a two-parter written by Ram V that have nothing to do with Year of the Villain. You can ignore them. In fact, I may well brand them as red after making this video because, again, they're just not related in any way. We then go back to the Joelle Jones story, which is Doom Rising, and that continues that. And then we have the Year of the Villain Catwoman special, ends with Zatanna, and then it sort of continues into the actual series itself. Right, let's go up to Deathstroke. Deathstroke's an interesting one because Deathstroke, I would actually recommend reading the issue before the offer, which is Deathstroke issue 44. It's an issue called RIP Prelude, and I think it's pretty much essential to read that if you want to read the one which is branded as the offer, because that's RIP Part 1. Then standard, you've got the the offer. You've then got Dark Gifts. You've then got Even Unleashed. You've then got Doom Rising, and you then have the Year of the Villain special, which is Jericho. It does end with the series cliffhanger saying to be continued, and the next issue after the Year of the Villain one shot is Deathstroke 50. So that is the series finale. But frankly, I wasn't particularly bothered about reading that. I have subsequently read it, but I feel if you're reading just Year of the Villain stuff, you'll probably be fine not carrying on after that issue. Okay, next we have Batman Detective Comics. Hopefully these little logos at the top are slightly helpful when you're navigating. Fingers crossed. Yeah, so Batman Detective Comics is here, and as you can see, similar sort of pattern. We've got the offer, and then what we actually have is a double header for Dark Gifts. Now, some of these series were actually printing twice a month, which is why you might get two issues that are branded as Dark Gifts. So what we have here is Dark Gifts, and then we have two branded Even Unleashed, two branded Dark Rising. You can see the covers here, going down to a Year of the Villain special. And that Year of the Villain special is Mr. and Mrs. Freeze. Again, it's related. It's got a bit to do with what's going on, but frankly, isn't really that exciting. It's kind of a parody of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, to be honest. Um, Most of these are, I'll be frank, just unrelated issues. They've got like very small nods at the end that relates to what's happening with Dr. Freeze and the Year of the Villain, but it really isn't that big a deal. After Mr. and Mr. Freeze, after the Year of the Villain one shot, you will notice there is a line coming out of this, and that's because Detective Comics is one of the very rare issues with the hostile takeover branding. Anyway, that ends the arc with Mr. Freeze, so that probably makes sense in terms of reading that. All right, let's go back up, and we're back here. And what's next? I think it is Hawkman, he says. I think it is Hawkman. It is indeed. Right. So what we have here, Hawkman's slightly confusing. I mean, what part of this isn't confusing? Do you know what I'm saying? But Hawkman is slightly confusing because Hawkman, we have the offer, fine. That goes down to Dark Gifts, Evil Unleashed, Doom Rising. Again, you can see all the pictures here. And then the Hawkman Year of the Villain one shot is actually branded Hawkman the Infected. However, it's not really, of the Infected story arc. We then have an issue of Hawkman which actually is branded The Infected, and that ends with a cliffhanger linked to the next arc, which, oddly enough, none of these Hawkman issues, despite being branded as Infected, have anything to do with the Infected series or miniseries or branding. Again, it's related, it's optional. So in the middle here, we've got Justice League. We're going to skip that, and we're going to move over to Batman Superman here on the side. So for Batman Superman, what we're going to do, let's just scroll over a little bit. You'll notice there's nothing to start with in the offer area of Batman Superman, because Batman Superman's a weird little mini-series, and only certain issues of it are going to be relevant here. Now, we're going to go all the way down. Batman Superman actually here comes in on the Infected. So we're going to talk about the infected in a few minutes when we get to that part. So just to make you aware, you will need some of these issues, but not all of them. It's slightly odd. It's all the way down here. So let's get back to some sense. We've got Supergirl. Supergirl issue The Offer. Now, this makes very little sense because this is in the middle of an arc called House of L, which, as you may have gathered, is part of the Superman event or mini event going on at the moment. So what you have here is Supergirl issue 32. You then have Supergirl issue 33, which I haven't included because it's not branded at all and is the House of L finale. It's totally unrelated in any way to the Year of the Villain event. In that sense, it's a little bit like the Catwoman issues by Ram B I was just talking about. Let me know, what do you think? Should I include them on the map and just mark them as red, or should I just not include them on the map at all? As I can obviously make clear, this is still very much a work in progress, so I'm just sharing my thoughts as I develop this. We then get into Evil Unleashed. Now, this is an unrelated issue, bizarre, barring a slightly bizarre Brainiac subplot, which does relate to Year of the Villain a little bit. We then have issue 35 here, which is a Doom Rising branded. And we then have Year of the Villain, Supergirl, The Infected. Now, this is called I'm the Bad Guy Part 1. And the interesting thing to note here is that actually this happens at the exact same time as Batman Superman issue 5, which you can see here next to it. Like I said, the Batman Superman stuff, it's slightly weird. I put in this grey line just because I'm not quite certain how it fits in and where it fits in. But anyway, we have Supergirl, Year of the Villain, issue 36, branded The Infected and parallel to Batman Superman 5. Supergirl 37 is next and is branded The Infected and is part of the Infected arc. Bizarrely enough, issue 38 and 39 aren't branded at all. So you might think to yourself, well, of course, Thomas, those aren't relevant. And I'd agree. Not least of all because issue 40 is also unbranded. So surely none of these are relevant. Except issue 40 ends by saying to be continued in Hell Arisen, which is the climax event for Year of the Villain. So I would say if you're going to read Supergirl, don't just end here with the last branded issue. You actually need to read all the way up to and including issue 40. By the way, if you're confused, it's only because you're paying attention. This event was one of the most complicated events to map I've ever done. The only thing I've ever done more complicated than this was Infinite Crisis. So next, after Supergirl, we're looking at the Terrifics. So the Terrifics is actually an ongoing series that spins out of the New Age of DC Heroes, which itself spins out of Dark Knight's Metal. So the first issue here that we're looking at, branded The Offer, is Terrifics issue 18. It's actually a part of an ongoing story arc called God Game. It's God Game Part 4. It's utterly impossible to follow this out of context, but don't worry about that. All you need to read are the last 2 pages of this. The rest of the issue, you won't understand it if you read it by itself, frankly, but you only need to understand the last 2 pages. After that, you've got Terrifics issue 19, Dark Gifts. Then you have issue 20, which is called If Me Could Turn Back Time Part 1. That's followed by If Me Could Turn Back Time Part 2, branded Doom Rising. And then the finale is actually the Year of the Villain issue there. All right, let's head back up. And in heading back up, we are looking at Wonder Woman. So let's move that to the right. So we've got Wonder Woman. And Wonder Woman is issue 75. That's branded The Offer, but it's actually Return of the Amazons Part 2. We then have 2 issues that are branded Dark Rising because, again, Wonder Woman being one of the tentpole series was releasing twice monthly. So we have Dark Rising and then we have Dark Rising in issue 77. Issue 77 is actually the start of an arc called Loveless. So that's Loveless Part 1. We will see 2 issues branded Evil Unleashed, and those are Loveless Part 2 and Part 3 respectively. We then have 2 issues branded Doom Rising, and those are Loveless Part 4, and then issue 81 is Loveless the finale. That takes us on to issue 82, which is a Cheetah Year of the Villain issue. It's actually the start of an arc called Wild Hunt. So there's that. That then leads into the rest of that arc, is a 2-part arc, which is Wonder Woman issue 83. It's not branded, as you can see, but it's Wild Hunt Part 2, and it actually features the character of Silencer. I haven't mentioned who Silencer is. You'll have to wait for my DC Rebirth guide to know. It's a secret. And then you got Wonder Woman issue 750, also unbranded, but it's the finale to the Wild Hunt. it actually has 9 stories in it. It's 100 pages long. The first story is 23 pages long and is the end of the arc. The rest of the stories don't really matter. But if you're reading Wonder Woman, you're reading Year of the Villain, you decide to go down this route, yep, you need to read issue 83 and issue 750. Cool. Overall, this entire arc is basically about Cheetah being given this awesome new weapon by Lex. It's pretty cool. Next, where are we? Justice League. That looks like Justice League Dark. It is Justice League Dark. Fantastic. Right. So Justice League Dark is well, they've got issue 13. It's the offer. Now, whilst technically not branded, by the way, technically the annual fits in here and will lead into issue 14, which is this one. Now, the reason I sound kind of skeptical about that is that this now takes us into the Witching War. So you have Dark Gifts, the Witching War Part 1, and then you have Evil Unleashed, which is Justice League Dark number 15. That's Witching War Part 2. And Justice League 16 is another installment in Witching War. Is Witching War Part 3. And then you have the Year of the Villain, which is Injustice League Dark. It ends with an in-series cliffhanger that leads on to issues 18 and 19 respectively. Frankly, I didn't feel the need to read them. I'm not really a very big fan of Justice League Dark, and the way this overlaps in a really weird and helpful way with the Witching War, which is kind of like a weird kind of like mini arc in itself. This isn't the same as the Witching Hour arc that crosses over with Wonder Woman, by the way. This is a separate thing, but it just wasn't a great use of this arc in this location because this 3-issue arc, Witching War, issues 1, 2, and 3, reference the earlier Witching Hour event. And I kind of hate reading an optional series that requires further homework. That Witching Hour event is a crossover between Justice League Dark and Wonder Woman earlier on. We haven't mentioned it before. It'll be part of my larger Rebirth map. All right, let's head back up. Where are we? We're looking at that Superman issue, which, again, as I said, is optional or token, more accurately. And let's look at the last few then. Right, so we are on to Nightwing. So with Nightwing, how am I doing for time? I'm doing all right. So with Nightwing, what we have is the offer. Now this has a spoiler in it for something that happens with KG Beast in Batman issue 55, just warning you. The rest of it is pretty standard. It's Dark Gifts, Even Unleashed, Doom Rising, and Year of the Villain here is Talon and the Court of Owls. It ends with an in-series cliffhanger, but I'm not particularly too worried about that. Next up, we then have Red Hood Outlaw. Now, Red Hood Outlaw, or rather Red Hood and the Outlaws, I was quite a fan of the series generally. So this issue here, the offer, is actually the finale of an ongoing arc called Prince of Gotham, but it is readable by itself. You then have Dark Gifts, you then have Evil Unleashed, you then have Doom Rising. You also have Year of the Villain Generation Outlaw. An alternate cover here did have hostile takeover branding, which I thought was kind of interesting. But yeah, that's basically just an interesting quirk here. It doesn't actually change the contents of the issue in it. Now, that arc then ends here with Red Hood Outlaw issue 41. It's not branded, but it is necessary to read this in order to finish the arc and understand what the hell is going on in this. And that takes us up to Teen Titans. So Teen Titans, the first issue here is issue 32. It's branded The Offer. It's called Daddy Issues Part 2. I personally didn't feel the need to read the preceding issue, and it ends with an offer being made to Lobo. We then have Dark Gifts, which is largely unrelated. We have Evil Unleashed, which is sort of unrelated, but does make a reference to the events of Year of the Villain Black Mask, a one-shot we'll talk about in a second. We then have Doom Rising, and we then have Year of the Villain, the Crush issue. Ends with an in-series cliffhanger. One thing I would stress very strongly is that you shouldn't really read this at all unless you've read all the Teen Titans series, because the issues we're looking at here have got some major plot twists and turns that are really key to enjoying Teen Titans. And frankly, they've got fuck all to do with Year of the Villain. I wouldn't really worry about it at all. You're not losing out by not reading Teen Titans. And I strongly recommend, like I say, reading Teen Titans as a whole rather than spoiling it by just reading these issues. Anyway, no further ado, the very last one of the optional or related issues. So we have Flash. Flash, The Offer. This is issue 75. It includes 3 stories in it. One of them is the year 1 finale because this ends the year 1 story arc. All you need to read is the third and final story. It's only 2 pages long. That's the offer. After that, you then go into Death and the Speed Force, which is a 6-part series. Again, as Flash holds a tentpole series or publication for DC Rebirth, looking at 2 issues a month. So you've got 76 and 77 branded Dark Gifts, 78 and 79 branded Unleashed, and then you have Doom Rising, 2 issues here, Death and the Speed Force conclusion. Year of the Villain is Captain Cold and the Rogues. This is Rogue's Reign Part 1. This arc honestly feels a lot like it's out of continuity in Elseworlds, but it's not. Just bear with it, stick with it. The next issue after this, none of these are now branded. Well, sorry, this one is. Issue 83 is a very rare hostile takeover branding. That's Rogue's Reign Part 2. After that, there's a whole bunch of them that aren't branded, but really, you're going to want to read them because the story just continues in these for some reason. It's not very Year of the Villain related, but it does continue the story you read up until this point. Whew, God, that's quite a lot, isn't it? Right. I meant to keep that quite brief, and I haven't. As you can imagine, I do understand this is quite overwhelming, and what we're going to do at some point is have a written guide made available. I might even stick this on my website. The hell with it. I might stick this on my website in the next few days when I get a chance. So it should be on there by the time this video drops. Why not? I'm going to pause for a second and grab a drink, and then we're going to dive into the main heart of the Year of the Villain story and the essential issues. Grab a drink, grab a snack, take a minute, and I'll see you in a second. And welcome back. Right. Okay, I hope you got a snack, a drink. Hope you had a chance to stretch your legs. I know I did. So, jumping straight back into it, this is the map again. So, we've covered everything on the right, we've covered everything on the left, which means we've covered all the red, token, or unrelated things, and we've covered all the amber related or sort of tangentially involved kind of issues. And so now we're going to dive straight into the hardcore, the straight, this is what the Year of the Villain is. So, as we mentioned before, right at the top, we have got Justice League. We discussed that Justice League issue, the Year of the Villain one shot, which is an extra long one shot. You can ignore the bits that have a nod towards things like Leviathan. We then have Justice League 26, which is unbranded, unlike Justice League 25 up here. So it's not branded as Year of the Villain, but you have to read it because it's part of the continuity. And then we get into proper Year of the Villain stuff. So we've got a couple of issues here. The Offer, Justice League 27 and 28, and then Justice League 29 and 30, 31 and 32 are now on Evil Unleashed. It then goes into Doom Rising for 33 and 34. And we then have the Year of the Villain, quote unquote, one shot for Justice League, which is called the Legion of Doom. This then takes us into a single hostile takeover issue, which is Justice League issue 36, Pawns of Perpetua. And all of this is all collected in one particular hardcover, and I think a clear trade as well. So just so you're aware, it is relatively easy to get hold of. Sorry, I'm just zooming out and it's gone a bit funny. But what I would say is I'm not going to talk about the collected editions today. I'm just talking about the reading order and the one-shots. So continuing on, we then get into some slightly odd territory. We get into some more Justice League issues here, and then we're going to look at a bunch of one-shots that exist to the side, and then also one-shots of something called the Infected. But we're going to talk about that in just a second. We've got a final 3 Justice League issues to talk about. You want to read 37, 38, and 39. And then you then get a whole bunch of one-shots. Now, this is when to read the one-shots. You will notice that I put them... Oh, where are they? You'll notice that I put them all here, like on the same level. And the reason I put them all on the same level is because, frankly speaking, the way this works is that if you want to read them, this is sort of the time that you would or could read them in any particular order. So we're going to start off with the one-shots here. And the one-shots here are, in no particular order, you've got the Year of the Villain, the Joker one-shot. You've got Lex Luthor, Year of the Villain. You've got Ocean Master, Year of the Villain. Black Mask, Year of the Villain. Sinestro, Year of the Villain. And Riddler, Year of the Villain. They're all reasonably decent. They can all be read at any particular time. I would argue they're kind of essential. But frankly, yeah, you don't have to read them, but they kind of all fit into this this part here. And frankly, if you're going to do a Year of the Villain read through, why would you not read them? You can understand it without reading them, but they really are part of the main mythos along with the Justice League stuff. The one thing to keep in mind on here is that there is another one shot here, which is the Black Adam one shot. He says, just zooming out. And the Black Adam one shot is actually over here on this side. Because on this side, on the left, you've got issues that I consider to be part of the Infected story arc. Now, the Infected story arc is definitely an essential part of the Year of the Villain story. You do definitely need to read it. This is what makes it kind of messy to tie it into Justice League. But at this point, having read the Justice League issues above, which ends with Justice League 39, what I'd recommend is dipping into the one-shots if you can get hold of them. Read them all as single standalone Year of the Villain issues about a particular villain. But the Black Adam one goes here and is very much part of a little sub-storyline called The Infected. So you've got Black Adam, there you go, Year of the Villain. You then have King Shazam, pretty much a standalone, but is part of the Infected kind of arc. Infected Deathbringer. Now, this was originally billed as being the Donna Troy Infected one-shot, but actually it's all the same thing. And then there is the Scarab Infected one-shot, again, pretty much standalone. And then you have the Infected The Commissioner, which is also pretty much standalone. Now, there's some other stuff you can see here. As you can see, we mentioned Supergirl before, and Supergirl 36 was Supergirl and the Infected. So you can see that up here. In fact, up here, Supergirl the Infected. And then you've got Infected branding for Supergirl 37, and it kind of continues on. So, yeah, if you're into the Infected stuff, you'd need to read Supergirl as well. I'm on the fence as to whether or not that's actually essential, but this is something that I'll consider when I actually put together the formal videos and the written guide. And keep in mind that Supergirl 36 is a paraquel, as we mentioned before, to Batman Superman number 5, which is this one here, the Batman Who Laughs one. So you've got Batman Superman here, and then you've got this, the paraquel. So it's all a little bit messy and all a little bit nested together. But that is the Infected stuff, is these issues you can see here, and then some of the Supergirl stuff, and then obviously it touches base with Batman Superman as well. As I mentioned right at the top of the video, what I would say is Batman Superman 1 to 4 lead into the Infected arc, and also the Batman Who Laughs maxi series, which you should read after Dark Knight's Metal, also reads into the Infected arc. So I'm going to have to rejig around the structure of this to make this map make a bit more sense in future, but I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it. As I said, this is on a par in terms of complexity with Infinite Crisis, which was hell to map. All right, zooming out a little bit, what we have here is Year of the Villain. So back to the core part of the series, you've got Hell Arisen. It's a 4-issue miniseries. You can see the covers here. You've got Year of the Villain, Hell Arisen 1, 2, 3, and 4. Keep in mind that issue 4 here ends with To Be Continued in Dark Knight's Death Metal. Now, there is a small bridging period of Justice League issues between the end of Hell Arisen and the start of the Justice League issues that go into Dark Knight's Death Metal. Frankly, they're not related whatsoever. They're kind of filler Justice League issues, but don't worry about those. I'm not even going to talk about those here because we're not going to talk about Dark Knight's Death Metal here. Just be aware that once you read Year of the Villain, Hell Arisen, once you read these 4 particular issues, it then tees you up for Dark Knight's Death Metal and the next major event. Okay, what is left? There is only one other thing to just keep in mind, and that is this random thing hanging over here. And this is Batman Superman, issue 6, which has got this weird branding, Aftermath of the Infected. Again, if you've been reading the Infected stuff, which you definitely should, this is an Aftermath issue thereof, but this is before Dark Knight's Death Metal, and really kind of before Hell Arisen. But it's an important issue to be aware of because it does tie into this overarching Year of the Villain event. Cool. All right, let's pan out. And what we have here is the entire event. And as I mentioned, I think I'm just going to stick this up on the website. I need to reorganize the website a bit to make it a bit more user-friendly, but I will stick this map up there if you're interested. Right, with no further ado, let's jump out of this and let's have a chat about a few of the final bits of housekeeping just to wrap this video up. Whew, that was a lot. Right, okay. This video is probably, what, 40 minutes long? 50 minutes long at this point? I'm sorry about that. That wasn't my expectation. But we're right in the last bits of just talking about this one massive mega event. Just a couple of things I wanted to say. There's a few other series out there that online reading guides say are part of this reading order. I disagree. The first one is they say Harley and Ivy is a sequel to Year of the Villain. It's not. It's a sequel to Heroes in Crisis. So this is another example of online reading guides randomly making a recommendation without having read the issues. Again, this is the reason why I do these maps myself. Another one that people talk about is Batman versus Ra's al Ghul, which is not, as far as I can tell, part of this. I've currently stuck it in my out of continuity comics, but that said, I haven't actually read the single issues yet. So when I read them, maybe that's going to change. Maybe this is just TBC. Um, is there anything else that I've missed? Is there anything else that you think is part of the Year of the Villain? Is there anything you agree or disagree with in terms of stuff that's essential or not? As I say, I think reading the Infected story arc, which itself is kind of sprawling and messy and starts off with the Batman Who Laughs maxi series, and then splits into Batman Superman and carries into Supergirl before you get the Year of the Villain branded Infected issues. I think that's a really good block of reading to read just before Hell Arisen. But am I wrong? Do you think that I should ignore those? Also, what about the one-shot issues? You know, the Joker, the Lex Luthor, the Ocean Master. Do you reckon they're essential or not? I'm kind of on the fence. Has anyone read the entire event? What do you think? Anyway, hopefully this was helpful. If you are doing a Rebirth reading order and a read through, then the next thing to read after this is Dark Knight Death Metal. But for now, I'm going to draw this particular video to a close, and I think I might follow it up tomorrow with just a brief kind of wrap-up video, again, talking a bit about Rebirth, talking a bit about the mapping and where we are, and maybe even doing a little bit of a what's in store for the channel over 2025, because I've got quite a few plans, and I'm probably going to fail to deliver on most of them. But my goal is to try to provide some great content for you, the human viewers.